Welcome to Just-in Time Lapse on today's edition of Cars That Live Under the Sea, where I'm going to take apart the right rear caliper of a 2005 Mitsubishi Shogun Sport, which is sticking. Things that should be moving aren't. I'm going to show you 10 different ways to unstick things and 3 mistakes I made during the making of this video. Here we're looking at the right rear caliper with the wheel removed, and as you can see, the main problem is rust. A pristine new caliper, here's the carrier bolt running through the middle of this cutaway. You can see you can get a socket on it, but what we're looking at is the head of the bolt is rusted, the threads are rusted, and where it goes into the caliper is also rusted, and that should be free moving. You wouldn't even be able to get a socket or a spanner on any of the fasteners to undo it. So we've got quite a challenge ahead of us, and we're going to need to use all the techniques in our armory. Technique 1. Hit it, but hit it gently. So what are we going to hit? Well, you want to hit the thing that you're trying to undo. In our case, it's this, it's the pin, but in this diagram, it's the caliper carrier bolt and the thing that it's in. So that's either the piece of metal that it's screwed into, like the one on the left, or the piece of metal that it's also rusted into, that it's not even screwed into, which is the bit on the right. So you can hit that too. How does it work? Well, metal transmits sound and energy through its crystalline structure. And you can see here that the energy from the place you hit it is going to radiate through the piece of metal that you hit. And what happens is it dumps the energy into the rust that's holding it together. And that means that the rust is going to become fractured and cracked, and it'll create lots of little micro cracks in it. So what you can see here is hitting. As you can see, I'm not holding the hammer heavily. I'm just working my way around and hitting all of the different parts. Now you're going to see me hitting the ends of the bolts as well. So you can see I'm working my way around methodically, hitting all the bolts, just tapping on the ends. This is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to break apart those two bits of metal and introduce some cracks in between. It's not a big effect, it contributes to other things, but it is a really, really important part of getting stuff on. Technique 2, brush it. Specifically, brush it with a wire brush. So we're brushing the caliper at the moment, and you can see all of the rust falling off. And that helps a little bit, but let's get a little bit more specific about what we're really trying to do here. So we're trying to undo these pins and the bolts on the side of the caliper. So where you want to be brushing it is you want to be brushing it around the head of the bolt that you're trying to undo. So you can see the top and the sides. And what that does is it loosens all of the rust there, which gets us closer to the actual head of the bolt, which means we might be able to get something on it. And once you've got that loose rust off, really concentrate on the area where the bolt joins the surface that it's rusted onto. How does it work? Well, it exposes the metal and it helps get a socket or spanner on. So you can see at the beginning here, these are barely visible. And then as we go along, we're getting a little bit more there. Also, you can see I'm already onto my second type of brush here, and the third type of brush here, and there's a fourth one coming out, shock horror. And we're using these different brushes to get different areas that we can't reach. Sometimes you'll also see me putting my fingers over the rubber dust boots. It's nothing like a wire brush to go straight through a CV boot or straight through a dust cover on a piston seal. Technique 3, heat it. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be heating the thing we want to undo or the thing that it's stuck in. And you can see here, these arrows are where I'd be applying heat to this. The head of the bolt, the thing it's screwed into, or the thing that it's stuck in. So why does that work? Well, what it does is it breaks the rust down. How does it do that? Metal expands when you heat it. So if you heat the head of that bolt, it's going to expand and it's going to crush the rust all around it. And then when it cools, it's going to shrink back and it's going to create a gap. So you can heat the thing you're trying to undo or the thing around the thing you're trying to undo, which will expand that and create a gap. Same thing. It'll form microfractures in the rust, which we can use later on to undo it. If you're a bit cautious like me, you might want to use one of these little digital thermometers. Here you can see the ambient temperature is about 10 degrees on the caliper, and I'm going to heat it up by about 100 degrees. The reason I'm doing that is I don't want to damage the piston seals or any of the other components that I still think I can save on this caliper. I'm a bit of an optimist, really. This is all going to need replacing. But let's say you just want to get this stuck thing apart and you don't want to have to buy new seals or damage the pistons or the seals. You just want to be doing about 100 degrees, and you can do that over and over and over again. So heat works really well with cooling in a cycle. Technique 4, chip it away. So what you're looking at here is a very rusted head of a bolt, and you can see there's great big lumps and flakes all on the outside. And the idea is chip it away, but be precise. So what we're going to do is use a flat bladed screwdriver, and we're just going to try and work our way from the head of the bolt down the side or along the face of the piece of metal that it's attached to. So if you look at this caliper, we're at the back of the caliper and we're working around the pin that we're trying to get out, and we're just taking off the loose rust. I'm using a hammer this time. Sometimes we won't be using a hammer, we might just be scraping with the tip of the screwdriver. And this works because rust is actually quite weak. If you just gently work away at it, you'll be managed to remove quite a lot. This time I'm just using a screwdriver on its own, and you can see I'm holding it with one hand at the tip and then the other hand at the shaft. And hopefully it might mean that we can get a socket on the end of one of these bolts in a minute. Tips for this are: be methodical. Work around all of the joins between the thing you're trying to undo and the thing that it's stuck in. So you can see here we're working around the pin at the back there. We're just trying to remove all of the rust that we can. Tip 5, patience. Don't get out the impact breaker or the windy gun. You will regret it. I know I did. Let the heat dissipate, let the oil penetrate, have a think, step away, have a brew. Tip number 6, how it works and the parts involved. So let's have a quick look at the parts diagram of this caliper and all the other components. What we're trying to do here is understand how it fits together, what's bolted to what should move and what shouldn't move, and in which directions it can move, because we're trying to get it undone. Here's a slightly more simplified view showing just the parts with a bit of colouring on. So you can see you've got the caliper in the middle, that's the big thing, the carrier, that's down to the right, the pins that we're trying to get off at the top right, and then you can see you've got the caliper carrier bolts and the sliders there in the top left, so they should be moving. I have a strong suspicion that this is all rusted together and in really bad condition, so it'll probably look a bit more like this. You can see you've got rust on the pins, the sliders, the caliper and the carrier and the piston. The tip here is, if you're on the verge of destroying something or you think you might destroy something, have a look at the parts catalogue and work out what you can buy separately and what you need to buy together. So this will give you a good idea of whether or not, if you're about to break something, it's going to be an entire new caliper or it's just going to be the pin. It'll also enable you to look up how much it's going to cost when you do destroy it, because you've got the part number right there. Pop it into Google or whatever and then you'll know how much you're in for. Technique number 7, penetrating fluid. You're probably wondering why this wasn't technique number 1. Well, let's think about what we've done so far. We're trying to get these cracks for the penetrating fluid to work into. So we need to remove the surface rust with brushing. We need to chip away the loose stuff, and then we need to heat it. And at that point, when we spray into the join, there's this magic called capillary action, which is going to pull the fluid in. There's some pretty clever physics going on here to do with the surface tension of the fluid, and that's why it works. And it works better the narrower the tube. So that's perfect for our cracks. Those gaps don't need to be wide. In fact, the narrower it is, the better. So here we're applying the fluid to the join between the bolts and the fasteners and the stuck things and the thing they're stuck in. So why does that work? Well, the fluid, as we've already discussed, will get drawn in. And then that's going to lubricate the insides. And then as we heat it, that's going to cause the gaps to appear and the fluid will be drawn in more. And then if we hit it, it'll cause a pumping action that'll help the fluid be pushed around. And all of that's just going to work the fluid in and around and help us unstick it. Technique number 8, quenching. This is the opposite of heating. We're using a bit of water to cool something down rapidly. I've set the caliper piston dust boot on fire, so I need to quench it. That's quenching. But actually, seriously, if you're heating and cooling, that will help separate things. Technique number 9, rotation. What we're going to do is try and get a set of mole grips on this pin and rotate it. It's not a bolt, but it could rotate. So why are we doing that? Well, we're trying to move it in a different plane. It should go in and out, but we're trying to move it round and round. And that might help break down the rust, because those bonds aren't uniform. If we can break down the rust bonds in this direction, it'll help us move the pin in the other direction. Mistake number 1, too much hitting and too much force. It's quite easy to get carried away, especially earlier on in the process of removing stuck, rusted stuff and using too much force. Too much hitting, too much twisting, just too much. What you're going to do is you're going to damage the thing you're trying to take apart. You're either going to round off a bolt because you smacked it on the corner or with the hammer, or in my case, what I'm doing here is I'm using the biggest punch in the world, because bigger is better obviously, to try and take this pin out. And now as a result, you can see I'm here with a file. Why am I here with a file? Well, basically I've splayed out the end of the pin, and that means it's never going to go through the hole that it sits in. So now I've got a job to basically file it back down to a size where it's going to go through. So this is your penance. If you do too much hitting, you might need to actually fix something that you've broken before you can carry on with the job, and that's a perfect example of what's going on here. So just be careful. If it's not moving for a reason. Don't just hit it harder, because chances are you're going to damage it. It's just a little pin. It's probably about 6 millimeters thick. Right, so now I've filed it down. I'm going to show you I'm going to show you a bit of success here. So you can see I've started to move it with the punch, and I'm just tapping it back in with the hammer. So you can see punch, hammer, little bit of WD-40, and then the mole grips, and a bit of rotation, a bit of a wiggle, and it's starting to come through. So I think I can grab a screwdriver and punch this all the way out. A little bit more WD, and here we go. Here's the screwdriver. Tink, 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 out. Now that's taken me, I reckon, a good couple of hours to do, all the way to just getting that one pin out. Now have a look at the pin. Have a look at the component when you remove it. What's that tell you? That tells you I don't think this caliper is going to be in a good state when I get it apart. Chances are the caliper carrier pins will be rusted, the pistons will be rusted, everything's going to be rusted. So I think I'm going to need to go back to my parts diagram and buy a caliper reseal kit, new pistons, new guide bolts, new mounting bolts. Mistake number 2, a sharp chisel. Now a sharp chisel, used in the right way, is actually a really, really good technique. However, this is the right technique at the wrong time. This pin is so badly corroded in, it's never going to move. And the result is, I've created another problem for myself. I've bent the pin, and now I've got to stick the screwdriver up behind it to try and unbend it. Mistake number 3. Now, this is the big one. You know, we were always talking about heat before. Well, you've got to think about how much heat an object can absorb and what it's made out of. In this case, I'm just not thinking. I'm getting carried away. So I've got this tiny little nut, which is a fitting for the brake hose and the copper brake hose. And then behind that, I've got the rubber flexi hose with a fitting that's just a press fitting. 290 degrees. That's way too hot. Boom! The fitting explodes. I'm backing away. I have my eye protection on. There's bits of brake fluid in there. There's water in there. It shouldn't have exploded, and it gives you an indication of quite how knackered these brake hoses are. I guess the only positive out of this is I need new brake hoses, because if you look at the end of that hose, there's so much corrosion on the fitting, it was probably going to blow anyway. No injuries, no problems, let's move on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start trying to undo this brake pipe, and it's stuck. So the copper hose is stuck into the fitting, but I've got a little bit of movement on there, and that's all we need. What I don't want to do is try and undo that fitting out of the flexi hose and then twist the copper pipe up into nothing. Our final technique, back and forth. This is the most important one, because once you've got a little bit of movement on something, you need to be able to move it back and forth. Firstly, apologies, the lighting screwed up, so I'm going to have to show you some static images here. We're looking at the brake fitting and the brake pipe that goes into it. And the brake fitting should be able to rotate with the brake pipe in it, but it won't. So what I'm having to do is I'm having to move the spanner between these two positions, back and forth and back and forth, and repeat. And I did this for about a minute, which feels like a really, really long time, but just gradually kept it moving and holding it with a pair of pliers really gently. Get to the limit of its movement and then move it back to the other end of its movement and just keep going. And eventually it broke down all of the little bits of rust and all of the little wedges, little bit of lube, and we ended up with the pipe coming off, which is brilliant. Last thing I'm going to show you today is just using that chisel just to take the hose clip, the hose retaining clip out. We're just going to use the chisel and just drive it up a little bit. Bing, bash, bosh, done. I figured out a better way of doing this, but it involves taking the caliper off the car. You'll also probably need to have a caliper rebuild kit, as it involves quite a lot more heat, but I definitely found that this was much, much quicker and much better. So if you're looking to get those pesky caliper pins out, I'll add the video on as a link at the end of this video. In addition, I did another video on how to remove evil stuck bleed nipples. This will work on steel calipers, but I can't guarantee that this will work on aluminium calipers. You'll need to take the caliper off the car because you need good light and you need basically to be able to get a good purchase on the nipple. But it does work. It's worked, well, 4 times out of 4 on this car. So yeah, check out that video too. Thanks. You've been watching Just in Time Lapse.